Hey YouTube fam, so today I am reviewing a book. It is a Christian book. It is called Man, Myth, Messiah by Rice Broocks. So he is a minister of the gospel and co-leader of a ministry as well. So this is a really good book to read if you're familiar with the movie franchise God's Not Dead, God's Not Dead 2, 3, so on. This is basically the evidence behind God's Not Dead 2. And he also wrote the evidence behind God's Not Dead, the first one, which is very good movies to check out. So if you haven't already, check those out. But basically in this book, he is just giving evidence of who Jesus is, how the Gospels, which is Mark, John, Luke, and what is the other one? Matthew, how they are credible, and basically dispelling any myths that people and atheists and unbelievers have brought up over the past century or so. He's gonna dispel all of that in this book and give evidence that Jesus Christ was living, is living, has lived, all of the above. And he's gonna go over all of that in this book. So I kind of want to go over just a few points that he went over in this book, and I took some notes. You can see the tabs, and I underlined a whole bunch of stuff that stuck out to me that I want to go back and refresh my mind whenever I do pick this book up again. So the first point I want to bring up is he brings up in the beginning of the book using the minimal facts approach method to engage non-believers in a meaningful conversation about Christ and why you are a believer to begin with. So I'm going to kind of cite from page 30, and this book is available on Amazon for about $17, so it's not too expensive. So basically on pages 30 and 31, he cites how non-believer historians who wrote about Jesus' crucifixion, about 4 of them wrote about his crucifixion. It may be more, but he cited at least 4 different non-Christian historians during that time of Jesus who wrote about his crucifixion and knew about it. So that proves that that proves that Jesus did die on the cross and that he did live on the earth and that he was real and is real. So another point that he brought up is how Jesus' resurrection from the grave happened and it wasn't made up. So all 4 Gospels written by men testify that there was woman witnesses, and he makes a point how during that time in the olden days that woman witnesses, women wouldn't really they'd be seen but not heard type of thing, which we know. So the fact that they noted that women that women had testimonies of seeing Jesus alive, after the resurrection, and that they noted that is very important because they had no reason to lie and say that it wasn't, So skeptics also say that the Gospels weren't copied from the original text, and you can see to page 54. And I'm gonna kind of read a little bit of what he says at the bottom of 54. It says, one of the stumbling blocks some skeptics face is that the Gospels were not copied from the original documents penned by the authors, but from later copies, manuscripts. This concern is completely baseless since virtually no other discovered historical documents are originals, unless they were chiseled in stone. The Gospels, like many ancient sources, were written on papyrus. I might be saying that wrong, which typically perish within a few hundred years. So there you have it for that. Nobody actually has the exact original copies of the Gospels, but he does go over how people during that time were able to pass down the information in a correct way without leaving anything out. They had a very accurate system in being able to do that. You can read more in the book. Between, those pages, he talks about it a little bit after as well. Page 57, 56. Yeah, people may question the credibility of the Gospels, but he mentioned how, in contrast, that the four Gospels were written between 30 and 70 years of Jesus' ministry, and on the other hand, Alexander the Great, his was written more than 300 years after his recorded events on his life biography. And then if you're familiar with Homer, the Iliad, that was written 350 to 400 years after the recorded events too. So the four Gospels are the closest manuscripts that we have that is written shortly after Jesus' ministry, compared to any other historical works that have been written over the past few decades. Another good point that he makes, and I'm gonna go over, I think this is like the last point that I kind of want to go over, because I don't want to get too deeply into the book. I can, but I just kind of want to bring up some notable points to go over if you do plan on checking the book out. Yeah, on page 92 and 93, he goes over how the Gospels are not copied from myths, but myths are copied from the Gospels, because any myths that we see that are very similar to what the Gospels have in the first place the myths are written shortly after the Gospels have been written. So that's a point, very important point that he makes on pages 132 and 133. He even cites from myths and gives us like some snippets of what these myths are saying and how it's trying to compare and contrast from the Gospels, basically. But yeah, the myths were written shortly after the Gospels and not the other way around. So another point to kind of think on if you are into reading myths and you think the Bible is the one that's a myth and the myth is the truth, and you've got it twisted. Okay, I did say that was the last point, but I see in my notes I had another point before that I wanted to go over, and it's a very important one. What sets Christianity apart from any other religion? Of course he had to go over that. So yeah, that's what's on page 92, 93 that I'm gonna go over, and probably a little bit further more, but those two pages I'm gonna kind of focus on for a minute and briefly read what he says. So he starts with a question: what stands out is the unequivocal distinction of the Christian faith. It is the only religion whose central tenet of faith is able to be tested in this manner. That claim is that Jesus Christ was bodily resurrected 3 days after his crucifixion. This was the primary message of his disciples that turned the world upside down. And then he cites 1 Corinthians 15:14, and he says how Christianity stands or falls on a singular event, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. It not only is the foundation for a credible faith, but it is a realistic hope from the suffocating uncertainty of what lies beyond the grave. And what sets Christianity apart, he brings up how Islam offers subjective tests to validate their claims. Like, for instance, the Quran states that the reader should ask if anyone can write a book like the Quran, and then he cites where you can find that. But he's like, how could such a claim be disproven? And he's like, that's like asking if someone can write Iliad or Moby Dick. It's like, you're not asking something that actually can be proven. So it makes it harder to even be able to answer that. A point that he didn't bring up that I kind of do bring up when people ask is that Islam, their perspective of Allah is that, you know, you just serve him, and it's like it's not a relationship. That's what sets Christianity apart from any other religion. They don't have a relationship with their God. It's just them serving them. That's it. They may kind of get, I guess, rewards in a sense, but I feel like the rewarding part is being able to have a relationship with the creator of the universe, and there's a lot of benefits you get from walking with Christ and serving Christ, and life is just more fulfilling than it just being a religion. Christianity, it's about a relationship over a religion, and not just following rules because you feel like you have to, because it's just, you know. But Christianity, you're following Christ because you want to, and you want to live your life differently, and you want to, you know, eventually end up, you know, in eternity with Jesus in heaven. So just another important point I wanted to make. And in Hinduism, he brings up how that Hinduism makes no attempt to verify itself, which is true. I've done a study on all of these religions aside from Christianity, so I know a little bit, you know, enough about them. And he says how there are millions of gods as they believe, and then convincing people to add one more would be needless, which is important. You know, that's true. Buddhism doesn't depend on whether Buddha was a real person, and certainly not on a claim on his part or his followers that he was God or a representative of God. Buddhism at its core requires an adherence to a set of philosophical commitments to right thinking and right living. So he kind of ends with saying how God is not interested in eliminating the culture of any nation. He is interested in transforming hearts and minds. So that's what set, you know, Christianity apart. You know, Jesus is interested in a relationship with us. There's numerous reasons why you should follow Jesus, but if you don't choose to, hey, nobody can force you. At the end of the day, we all have free will. But yeah, he mostly just, you know, goes over the 4 Gospels and how Jesus was active in his ministry, and how we can, you know, prove to others that, you know, he lives, the resurrection, the crucifixion, all of that stuff happened. And he gives numerous claims and evidence, more so over claims, to, you know, really think about whether you're on the believer spectrum or the atheist spectrum. And he even gives, you know, sightings for each chapter from articles and books that he's looked over. So even if you don't want to believe what he's saying, you can go through the citations yourself and go look into what he researched, because he thoroughly researched for this book. But yeah, that's all that I have for y'all. That's it for the videos for today, at least the longer form videos. And I will be reviewing another book that I just got, because I just finished. This one took me, I don't know, maybe 5 or 4 months to finish, because I wanted to go through it slowly and take notes and, you know, really take in what I was reading and not rush through it. And I recently got another book that Tiffany Montgomery recommended. It's called Breaking Demonic Covenants and Curses. Very good book. I'm only 50 pages in, well, 60 pages in, and I think it has about 300 to 400, I'm not sure, but it's just about as big as, you know, this one. So it'll take me some time to read it, but I mean, we'll see. That's another book that I will be reviewing and kind of giving an overview over. So yeah, just stay tuned for that, and I pray y'all have a blessed rest of the week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.